A quiet afternoon outside an elementary school in a small American town should have been forgettable. Parents waited along the curb, engines idling, watching the front gates as children poured out with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. The air was filled with the usual sounds of dismissal time: laughter, car doors opening, teachers calling out reminders for homework and tomorrow's field trip. Nothing about that moment suggested it would soon become one of the most talked-about confrontations the town had ever witnessed. But then a patrol car rolled slowly toward the curb, its lights flashing just enough to draw attention without the noise of a siren. Conversations softened. A few parents glanced up from their phones. At first it seemed routine, the kind of brief exchange that happens every day between officers and drivers near busy school zones. Yet within seconds, the atmosphere shifted. A single sentence from the officer cut through the afternoon chatter, loud enough that several people stopped mid-step and turned toward the scene. Faces tightened. A few parents looked stunned, unsure if they had heard correctly. And before anyone had time to process what had just been said, a small voice rose from the edge of the crowd. It belonged to a young girl, no more than 8 years old, standing just a few feet away from the man the officer had confronted. She stepped forward with the kind of courage that only children sometimes show, looking directly at the uniformed officer and asking a question that froze the entire sidewalk. "Did you just call my dad the N-word?" In that moment, everything changed. Several parents instinctively reached for their phones. One camera turned into 5, and within seconds the confrontation was being recorded from every angle. The officer seemed taken aback. The father stood silently beside his daughter, and the crowd watched as tension thickened in the air. What happened during those next few minutes would soon be uploaded online, shared across social media, and replayed by millions of viewers across the country. For many people who saw the clip later that night, the story seemed clear. An officer, a father, and a child caught in a moment of public humiliation. The outrage came quickly. Comment sections filled with anger, news outlets began asking questions, and local officials found themselves facing a wave of criticism that no one had anticipated earlier that afternoon. But as the video spread, something about the story refused to settle. Witnesses began sharing slightly different versions of what they heard. Some insisted the officer's words were exactly what the child accused him of saying. Others claimed there had been shouting from nearby parents moments before the confrontation. The more the clips circulated, the more the timeline of events became tangled with speculation, assumptions, and emotional reactions from people who had not been there. Yet one thing remained undeniable. That small voice, standing up in defense of her father, had transformed an ordinary school pickup into a national conversation about respect, authority, and the power of a single moment captured on camera. For the police department in that town, the situation escalated faster than anyone expected. Within hours of the video appearing online, the department released a brief statement acknowledging they were aware of the incident and reviewing the footage. By the following morning, reporters had gathered outside the station asking whether the officer involved would face disciplinary action. Community leaders called for transparency. Parents at the school discussed the incident at bus stops and grocery stores, replaying the moment in their minds and wondering how something so small had exploded into something so large. Yet behind the viral clip that millions of people were now debating was a much longer story, one that began well before that afternoon outside the school gates. To understand why that confrontation unfolded the way it did, we have to look closely at the people involved, the decisions made in the minutes leading up to that exchange, and the surprising details investigators later uncovered when they reviewed the full sequence of events. Because the video the world watched again and again captured only a brief fragment of what really happened that day. And as more information slowly came to light, the narrative that first ignited outrage began to shift in ways few viewers could have imagined. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. On a warm weekday afternoon outside a quiet elementary school, parents gathered along the curb waiting for their children, expecting nothing more than the familiar routine of backpacks, car doors, and the relief of another school day ending. But in a matter of seconds, that ordinary moment would transform into something that would spread across the entire country. A police officer had approached a father over what appeared to be a simple parking dispute. the kind of minor argument people witness every day without thinking twice. Then a voice from the crowd changed everything. An 8-year-old girl stepped forward and asked a question that stunned the entire sidewalk. Did the officer just call her father the N-word? Within hours, the short clip of that confrontation was circulating across social media, drawing millions of views and igniting fierce debate about what had actually happened. But the viral video only captured a brief moment, leaving people asking deeper questions. Who was the officer involved? What exactly took place in the minutes before the cameras started recording? And why did what looked like a routine disagreement outside a school suddenly explode into a national controversy discussed across television networks and online forums across the United States? Even more important, was the officer truly guilty of the accusation that spread across the internet that day, or was there a part of the story that the public had not yet heard? Investigators, witnesses, and even members of the community began searching for answers as the story grew larger with each passing hour. To understand how that moment unfolded and why it captured the attention of so many people, we have to go back to the beginning and carefully piece together the events that led to that confrontation. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. In the quiet neighborhood where Daniel Carter lived, most people knew him as the man who left for work before sunrise and returned home just in time to help his daughter with homework at the kitchen table. For nearly 20 years, he had worked in construction, slowly building a stable life for his family through long days, early mornings, and the belief that consistency mattered more than anything else. Neighbors often described Daniel as calm and respectful, someone who kept to himself yet always greeted others with a simple nod or wave. But the role that defined him most was being a father to his 8-year-old daughter, Emily. Every weekday afternoon, he followed the same routine, arriving outside her elementary school a few minutes early, parking near the curb, and waiting patiently among the line of parents as children streamed out of the building. It was a small ritual that rarely drew attention, the kind of everyday moment families across America repeat without thinking twice. Yet on one particular afternoon, that ordinary routine would lead Daniel and his daughter into a confrontation that would soon be watched by millions across the country. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. For nearly 12 years, Officer Michael Turner had worn the same uniform and patrolled the same streets, building a reputation as a man who took his job seriously. Fellow officers often described him as disciplined and focused, someone who believed that rules existed for a reason and that enforcing them kept order in a community that depended on structure. Most of his shifts were routine, filled with traffic stops, neighborhood patrols, and the quiet responsibilities that rarely make headlines. But over the previous year, a few residents had begun sharing concerns about the way some encounters ended. They spoke about a sharper tone during traffic stops and arguments that escalated faster than expected. None of those complaints led to formal punishment, yet they slowly shaped how some people in town viewed the officer who once blended into the background of daily life. On the afternoon outside that elementary school, Officer Turner was simply following his usual patrol route when he noticed a vehicle stopped near the curb where parking rules were strictly enforced. What appeared to be a small violation was enough for him to step out of his patrol car and approach the driver. Within minutes, that routine decision would place him face. What happened next began with something so small that most people would have expected it to end in seconds. Officer Michael Turner approached Daniel Carter's car and pointed toward the painted curb beside the crosswalk, explaining that the area was restricted during school pickup hours. Daniel responded calmly at first, telling the officer he had only stopped for a moment while waiting for his daughter to walk out of the school gates. The conversation should have ended there, but witnesses nearby later said the tone between the two men began to shift. The officer repeated the rule more firmly, and Daniel pushed back, insisting he was not blocking traffic or creating danger. As their voices grew louder, other parents waiting along the sidewalk began to notice the argument unfolding beside them. A few people paused their conversations and turned their attention toward the exchange. Some parents quietly moved their children closer while watching from a distance. Within moments, a simple parking discussion had drawn the attention of nearly everyone standing outside the school. Then, during the heated back and forth, Something was said that caused several people in the crowd to react at once, their expressions changing as if they had heard something that should never have been spoken in that place. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Several people standing near the school gates would later say that the moment happened so quickly it took a few seconds for anyone to understand what they had just heard. The conversation between Officer Michael Turner and Daniel Carter had already grown tense, but then a phrase was spoken that caused the air around them to fall silent. A few parents turned their heads toward each other in disbelief, wondering if they had understood the words correctly. Daniel stood still beside his car, his expression shifting from frustration to shock as murmurs began spreading through the small crowd gathering along the sidewalk. Before anyone else could react, a small voice cut through the quiet tension. Daniel's daughter, Emily, had just stepped out from the line of students leaving the school, her backpack resting on her shoulders as she moved closer to her father. She looked up at the officer, her face filled with confusion and determination, and asked a question that would soon travel far beyond that quiet street. "Did you just call my dad the N-word?" The words seemed to freeze the moment in place, and within seconds several parents instinctively raised their phones, recording the confrontation as it unfolded in front of them. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Within hours of the confrontation outside the school gates, the short clip recorded by several parents had already spread across social media, moving from one phone screen to another faster than anyone in that small neighborhood could have imagined. The moment of Emily Carter standing beside her father and asking the officer that unforgettable question was replayed again and again, drawing millions of views and sparking intense reactions from viewers across the country. Some people demanded immediate action against Officer Michael Turner, insisting that no officer should speak to a citizen that way, especially in front of a child. Others wondered whether the viral clip had captured the entire exchange or only a fragment of what had happened during those tense minutes on the curb. Local television stations soon aired the footage, while community leaders called for answers and transparency from the police department. Within a single day, the quiet town found itself at the center of a national discussion. But as investigators carefully examined the full recordings and spoke with witnesses who had been standing nearby, they began to uncover details that raised new questions about what truly occurred during that confrontation. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. As the investigation continued, analysts reviewed every available recording from the scene, carefully examining the audio captured by several phones held by parents standing along the sidewalk. What they discovered added a layer of complexity to a moment that millions of viewers believed they already understood. The viral clip that had raced across the internet showed only a brief section of the exchange between Officer Michael Turner and Daniel Carter. Earlier in the argument, another voice from the crowd had shouted an offensive phrase toward the officer, and investigators concluded that the officer had repeated the words while responding to that interruption. By the time those details surfaced, the video had already shaped public opinion. Across the country, many people had formed their conclusions based on the short clip alone. Officer Turner's reputation had been damaged, and the Carter family carried the memory of that afternoon long after the headlines faded. The video remained online, shared thousands of times, serving as a reminder that moments captured in seconds can travel far beyond the place where they first occurred. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.